She's not capable of running a billion-dollar company, my stepmother mocked loudly. She flunked out of college twice. The chairman chuckled, Nepotism's AHLL of a DRG. I just nodded, while a hidden algorithm crashed their entire system. In 24 hours, they'd come crawling to me. She's not capable of running a billion-dollar company, Letitia said, loud enough for the entire boardroom to hear. She flunked out of college, twice. The chairman chuckled. Nepotism's a heck of a drug. I just nodded. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue. Because I already knew that in less than 24 hours, everything around them would collapse. And I'd be the only one who could fix it. I wasn't raised to take revenge. My dad believed in turning the other cheek. But he also believed in not letting people walk over you. If you know you're right, he used to say, you don't need to yell about it. Just prove it. My dad, Martin Elridge, was one of those rare people who became wildly successful and somehow still remembered what it was like to be overlooked. He built Elridge Technologies in the 90s from a single desk in a Boston apartment. By the time I was born, he was well on his way to being a titan. And yet, he was always just Dad. My mother died when I was 8. Cancer. Fast and brutal. My dad never really recovered from it emotionally, but 2 years later, Letitia came into our lives. She was elegant, well-spoken, and had 2 sons from a previous marriage, Felix and Blaine. They moved into our brownstone in Manhattan like they'd been waiting for it all their lives. That's when everything started to feel different. I wasn't treated badly, exactly. But I was excluded from things. Family decisions were made without me. Letitia would call me quirky when she spoke about me to others, which sounded harmless until you heard the tone. Over the years, she shaped the narrative around me as the creative but unreliable daughter. When I dropped out of Stanford during a mental health breakdown, she used it to support her story. When I flunked out of Columbia later, during the tail end of a failed startup, I think she actually celebrated. She once told me over wine, when my father was out of town, you were never built for responsibility. You're too sensitive, Aurora. It's not a flaw, it's just how you are. That line stayed with me. Not because it hurt. But because I think she actually believed it. When Dad died suddenly of a heart attack last year, my world crumbled. Not just from grief, but because I could already see what was coming. My dad had left a majority share of the company to me, 60%. But it came with a catch. I had to be actively involved in the direction and leadership of the company within 1 year. He wanted to give me the reins. But he also didn't want to force me into a role I didn't want. Letitia, naturally, saw this as an opportunity. She immediately started working the board. She had connections, charity circuits, gala dinners, and more than a few favors owed. The company was publicly traded, but the board still had immense power in decisions about executive control. She leaned hard into the image of me as a flighty artist, someone who would ruin a billion-dollar brand out of stubborn pride. Her sons, especially Blaine, joined the campaign. And the board listened. They dismissed me as emotional, inexperienced, unstable. No one bothered to ask what I'd actually been doing the past few years. I didn't bother defending myself either. Because by then, I was already working on something. After my father died, I left the penthouse and moved into a small studio in Bushwick. I needed clarity. I went through old emails my father sent me, his notes, his design documents, his early business philosophy. What I discovered was both inspiring and terrifying. The foundation of Elridge Technologies was brilliant, but patchworked. The company had grown too fast in the last 10 years. Too many systems were duct-taped together, and too many departments had grown without interdependency or checks. The infrastructure was vulnerable. And so, I began building Dawn. Dawn wasn't a virus. It wasn't even malware. It was an algorithm designed to trace weaknesses, specifically, the critical failure points in enterprise systems. What would happen, for example, if the logistics routing engine experienced a silent data corruption? What if the CRM servers hit a deadlock in sync? What if the scheduling algorithms encountered unpredictable load variance due to international regulatory latency? Dawn could model those scenarios. And if you allowed it, it could simulate them, harmlessly. Or, less harmlessly. I wasn't planning on using it. Not at first. But then Letitia pushed too far. She publicly announced during a shareholder call that I had declined the invitation to lead the company. She did this before I'd said anything. It was a calculated move. She was trying to corner me. Paint me as cowardly or incompetent. The final straw was that board meeting. I walked into the conference room like I was walking into my own trial. Letitia wore a navy suit, hair pulled back, voice sharp as knives. She's not capable of running a billion-dollar company, she said, addressing the board but clearly directing it toward me. She flunked out of college. Twice. The chairman, DeForest, a man who used to carry me on his shoulders during Christmas parties, laughed. Nepotism's a heck of a drug. I nodded. Said nothing. But inside, something clicked into place. Because Dawn had finished running. And the simulation showed exactly how weak their systems were. So I made a choice. At 5:47 p.m., I flipped the switch. I didn't break anything. I simply allowed Dawn to show them the truth. By 9 p.m., the logistics systems were dispatching to invalid coordinates. The CRM sync servers began queuing data but never executing. The scheduling system looped repeatedly on outdated calendar entries. One by one, systems locked. By midnight, the entire company was paralyzed. I didn't answer the first calls. I let them sit in the silence. But I knew they'd come. At 9:04 the next morning, Blaine called me. His voice was shaky. Aurora, something's really wrong with the systems. We can't, everything's down. We don't know why. I told him I'd be available at 3 p.m. for a meeting with the board. By 3:05 p.m., I walked into that same boardroom. Letitia looked like she hadn't slept. DeForest didn't meet my eyes. We need your help, he said. And that's when I gave them my terms. But I'll save that part for the next post. Because honestly, I still haven't processed what happened afterward. Or how fast things turned. Let me know if anyone's interested in hearing what happened after I took over. It wasn't smooth sailing. Not even close. But I will say this, I didn't just get my father's company back. I finally got the truth about my family, too. And it wasn't pretty. I didn't walk into that boardroom at 3:05 p.m. looking for vindication. I walked in knowing that I was the only person in the building who truly understood how close they were to a full collapse. Maybe that sounds arrogant, but after 6 months of picking apart their systems like a surgeon studying a body riddled with silent cancer, I knew the reality they refused to face. Letitia didn't say a word when I entered. She had her arms folded, mouth drawn into that thin, practiced line I'd seen 1,000 times. The board sat still. No laughter this time. Just glances across the table and nervous drumming of fingers on wood. I sat down and set a leather folder on the table. I assume you all understand the scope of the issue now, I said, my voice level. Chairman DeForest nodded, slowly. We do. We need your help, Aurora. It was strange, hearing that from him. A man who once scoffed at me when I tried to speak in meetings, who once asked if I was just here to take notes. But now, he looked tired. Pale. The systems are frozen, he continued. We can't re-establish command of half the logistics chain, and our AI scheduler is looping. No one knows what's causing it. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I opened the folder and slid over a printed page. These are my terms. Letitia's eyes flared as she leaned forward. This is a power grab, she said, her voice rising. You're holding this company hostage, your father's legacy. He would never, you don't get to speak for him anymore, I interrupted, more sharply than I expected. You forfeited that right when you lied about my intentions to the shareholders. When you told the board I declined my role. She opened her mouth, closed it again. I turned to DeForest. Full executive control. Effective immediately. Letitia and her son stepped down from all board and advisory roles. The company issues a statement acknowledging the transition. Publicly. And if we don't agree, someone asked from the far end of the table. It was Vice Chair Mendez, one of Letitia's allies. I looked directly at him. Then the system stays down. You lose every contract you're sitting on. Every partnership. Every ounce of confidence your shareholders still have. And I walk away. There was a silence in the room so deep I could hear the air conditioner kick on. DeForest nodded. We'll have legal draft it. Letitia stood up abruptly. Her chair screeched against the polished floor. This is a mistake, she hissed. She doesn't have the temperament. She's unstable. You're all insane if you hand this company to her. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Her voice sounded less commanding than usual. Frantic, even. And for the first time, I saw something new behind her eyes, fear. They signed the documents within 2 hours. By 7:15 p.m. that evening, I had legal confirmation and executive clearance. I took the elevator alone to the 39th floor, the CEO suite. The same office my dad used to let me play in when I was a kid. I remember spinning in his leather chair, pretending I was running meetings, while he answered calls and scribbled notes on a yellow legal pad. I opened one of the drawers that night and found one of those same yellow pads. His handwriting was still on it. Messy. All caps. It just said, "Believe in her." I sat there for a long time with that note in my lap. I don't think I cried. I think I just breathed. The next week was a blur. Dawn helped me restore the systems in less than 48 hours. I walked the tech teams through every vulnerability. Not just patching them, but rebuilding entire logic flows. For the first time in years, the backend ran smoother than ever before. But the public didn't know that. Not yet. What they saw was a new CEO, one whose name they recognized only vaguely from old family press releases. Letitia, true to form, didn't go quietly. She leaked a version of events to a few press outlets, claiming I coerced the board, suggesting I'd hampered the company to take over. My PR team moved quickly. We released a statement that was short, factual, and sharp. We included the letter my father wrote naming me as successor. We included a timeline showing board decisions, public statements, and performance metrics. We didn't attack her. We didn't have to. Because the numbers spoke for themselves. Within a month, Elridge Technology stabilized. Within 3, our quarterly performance surpassed projections. Clients returned. Some even increased their investments, citing our improved transparency and innovation in internal processes. I should have felt triumphant. But something was gnawing at me. Something I didn't want to say out loud yet. Because even though I had won the power struggle, I hadn't yet understood the full cost. Not just in family, but in something deeper, something more unsettling. It started with a phone call. One that came late at night, long after the dust had settled. It wasn't from Letitia. It was from someone who claimed to be my father's former attorney, someone I'd never met, who said he had something he needed to show me. About my inheritance. About what my father really left behind. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I was ready to know. The man's voice on the other end was careful, low. Not ominous, exactly, but practiced. Like someone used to measuring his words. "This is probably unexpected," he said, "but your father retained me for personal legal matters. Not business related. I wasn't part of the estate you went through with Letitia's lawyers." I was sitting on the edge of my bed, a cold glass of water untouched beside me. It was just past midnight, and the city was humming outside my window in that way it does when everything feels both asleep and impossibly alive. "What kind of legal matters?" I asked. He hesitated. Things he didn't want in the public record. I believe there are some letters. And an account. I think it's important you see them in person. There was something about his tone that pulled at me. Not urgent. But unfinished. Like a sentence that had never been given a period. We agreed to meet the following Tuesday in a discreet office space in the Flatiron district. I brought no one. Not because I didn't trust him, but because something told me my father had intended it this way. Quiet. Personal. The man, Victor Ramos, was in his 60s, with a faded gray suit and leather briefcase that looked older than I was. He didn't offer small talk. Just a nod, and a hand gesture toward the folder he slid across the table. Inside were several typed documents, but tucked between them was something that stopped my breath. My father's handwriting. The same all caps I'd seen on yellow legal pads. The same loops and hurried lines. My name on the front of the envelope. It wasn't a will. It wasn't financial. It was a letter. 4 pages long. Written 2 months before he died. Aurora, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if Victor's followed my instructions, then you're sitting where I once sat, wondering what this all means. I didn't always get things right. I know I should have protected you better from Letitia's influence. I should have spoken up more when she made you feel small. But I also believed something about you, something I couldn't force the world to see, only trust it would one day have to. You've always had a kind of quiet vision, Rory. You see under things. Around corners. People mistake your silence for uncertainty, but I've always known better. I gave you the company because I knew you'd see it through, not just manage it, but see it. And change it. But there's something else. Something I couldn't leave in the open. Not with Letitia circling, and not with the board trying to box you out. There's another trust. It's not listed anywhere public. Victor will walk you through it. Inside are the designs for something we never launched, something you might, if you think it's time. No pressure. No strings. Just something I built for the future. You decide what to do with it. I trust you. Always have. Love, Dad. The words blurred for a second. I don't think I cried, but my chest felt heavy, like something had caved in and expanded at the same time. Victor watched me carefully, then opened another envelope. Inside was a flash drive, and a list of credentials. Offshore account. 2 more files on secure servers. We've kept this off the books, as he instructed, he said. But you should know, your father was working on something far more radical than what Elridge Tech ever released. I didn't understand at first. I mean, I knew my father had always been ahead of his time. But the implication was enormous. Victor continued, he was building a decentralized intelligence framework. Not artificial intelligence in the traditional sense, but a self-correcting neural model designed to evolve outside any institutional control. I blinked. You mean, something like Dawn? No, he said. Much more advanced. Dawn runs simulations. This was designed to think. I left that office with the drive in my pocket and a storm in my head. Back at the office, I didn't mention it to anyone. Not even my new CTO, Kara, who had become one of the few people I trusted in the company. Instead, I started reviewing the files at night, alone in my apartment. What I found made my stomach flip. My father had called the project Kairos, Greek for the opportune moment. He'd built the framework around ethical decision modeling, a kind of morality in motion processor. It wasn't meant to solve business problems. It was meant to solve human ones. Conflict prediction, resource allocation based on lived context, social risk modeling. This wasn't enterprise software. It was closer to something philosophical. He'd written in the notes, we don't need faster processors. We need wiser ones. Machines that weigh consequences instead of optimizing profit. The tech world isn't ready. But one day, maybe she will be. I knew what she meant. Me. But as I dug deeper, something began to itch in my mind. Not everything lined up. The dates, the logs, the backup history, someone else had accessed the folders. Recently, a month after my dad's death, someone had seen Kairos. I double-checked the access logs. A set of credentials tied to a Felix L. Felix, my stepbrother. I hadn't seen him since I took over the company. He had resigned quietly, didn't fight like Letitia. Just vanished. Now I understood why. He'd found the project. And I had no idea what he'd done with it. I didn't go to work the next day. Instead, I sat in my apartment with the curtains drawn, the hum of my old fridge buzzing behind me, and stared at the screen. Felix had accessed the Kairos folder 3 weeks after our father's funeral. Not just once. Several times. The logs showed activity from a remote IP that matched a domain I vaguely recognized, something Letitia had funded years ago, a small AI incubator in the valley that never amounted to much publicly. He hadn't stolen Kairos outright. But he'd copied major components, enough to know what it was and what it could become. And that scared me more than anything. Because Felix wasn't a fool. He was dangerous in a quiet, corporate snake kind of way. Ambitious, detached, and much more tech-savvy than most people gave him credit for. My father never trusted him with any real control, and Felix resented that, deeply. I remember him once saying, after a tense family dinner, "He gave you the spotlight because you're adopted. He had to overcompensate. You weren't the bloodline." At the time, I thought it was just anger talking. Now I knew it was something else. Jealousy. And maybe something worse. I needed to know what Felix planned to do with the stolen code. So I did what I knew best, I traced his movements. Quietly. Through a former colleague of mine, someone I'd once worked with during my failed startup days, I learned Felix had partnered with a hedge-backed innovation firm in Menlo Park. Their recent press releases were vague, filled with buzzwords like ethical forecasting and predictive governance. They were calling the product Insightus. I laughed out loud when I saw the name. It sounded like a vitamin supplement. But the real kicker? They were prepping for a private demo in 2 weeks, pitching to a panel of investors for a rumored $40 million seed round. And that's when it hit me. He was trying to sell it before we even had the chance to launch. He was going to build an empire out of something my father created in secret, something meant to help people, not fill another venture capitalist's yacht fund. I called my lawyer. Then my CTO. Then our head of information security. Over the next 10 days, I didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night. We ran full side-by-side audits. We found enough code similarity to establish clear intellectual theft. Kairos hadn't been publicly disclosed, but every line of that original framework had been timestamped and hashed. We had cryptographic proof of authorship. But I didn't want to sue. Not yet. I wanted them to crash. On the morning of the Insightus pitch, I flew to San Francisco. Not to confront Felix, but to join the conference anonymously. I wore a beige blazer, hair tied back, no badge. Sat in the second row. Felix walked on stage in a fitted navy suit, slicked back hair, and a tone that was too polished to be sincere. He spoke for exactly 12 minutes. Enough to dazzle the investors, but not enough to invite questions. They clapped. They smiled. Then the moderator stepped up. "We have one final demo participant, unexpected, but vetted. Elridge Technologies." Felix froze. I walked on stage. Kara followed me, laptop in hand, and connected to the big screen. "Hi," I said to the room. "My name is Aurora Elridge. I'm CEO of Elridge Technologies. I'm not here to pitch for funding. I'm here to set the record straight." And then I showed them. Not Dawn. Not even full Kairos. Just the original timestamp logs. The framework prototypes. The paper my father had written on ethical logic modeling in adaptive systems. The investor panel watched, stunned, as I overlaid Felix's stolen design over our own source material. "There's nothing innovative about Insightus," I finished. It's a cut and paste of a legacy that wasn't his to sell. The silence in the room wasn't hostile. It was respectful. And just like that, his pitch imploded. The following week, we filed a cease and desist. Felix's partners pulled out. He released a statement calling the situation a misunderstanding and disappeared from the industry soon after. Letitia, for her part, tried to call me. Twice. I didn't answer. Instead, I went back to New York and sat in my father's office, now my office, and opened the final file inside the Kairos archive. A simulation my father had run just 2 weeks before he died. It modeled something simple: what would happen if a single person tried to game a system designed for honesty? The model corrected itself. Every time. He'd built it with fail-safes. He trusted me to protect it. But he'd also trusted it to protect itself. I sat back in my chair, sunlight streaming through the window, and for the first time in over a year, I felt the weight in my chest lift. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about restoring balance. About honoring what was built, not just by code, but by care. I didn't destroy Felix. I didn't bankrupt him or humiliate him. I just held a mirror up. And let him walk into it on his own. Today, Outrage Technologies is more than a tech company. We're rebuilding Kairos for launch, open source, peer-reviewed, transparent. My father's name is on the project, alongside mine. People still ask if I flunked out of college. I say yes. And then I show them what I built anyway.